Я рад приветствовать уважаемых зрителей.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to welcome all the panelists and all the viewers to our session, and we will talk about schools of the future, innovative schools, and how to build them. First, I would like to introduce our panelists, Видади Мирзаев, consultants for professional counseling, for guidance counseling, Yernar Akissev, principal, Quantum Primary School, Kangildev Kompinbaev, principal, Thomas Space School, and Aliya Kadyrova, Innovation Manager, High School, Blinkama, Almaty. Aliya?
Да, здравствуйте.
Yes, hello. Hello.
Также хочу представиться сам. Меня зовут Адлет Илюсов.
Меня зовут Адлет Илюсов. I'm founder of Teachers Lab, which is a marketplace for teachers across the former Soviet Union. I will moderate this foresight discussion. This format, foresight, what does that entail? It means that with the panelists, we will try to identify what are the unique features of a school of the future and what are the challenges of contemporary education. The plan for discussion. I will raise some general questions, and every panelist will have an opportunity to answer those general questions. Then each speaker will get 5 to 10 minutes to talk about the most important issues that they believe are mostly important for contemporary education. To get the ball rolling, I would like to talk about our session a little bit myself. Well, as already said, we'll be talking about the school of the future. First, we need to be on the same page in terms of vocabulary and in terms of definition. What is a school of the future? I believe innovation in education is widely overestimated in terms of new technologies. First, people believe that radio, that TV, internet would preempt traditional education. But the format of education overall has withstood the challenges of these disruptive technologies, and it hasn't changed over centuries. So you have a classroom, you have your teacher, and you have your students. So question number one, in your mind's eye, what is an innovative school? And should all schools of the future be innovative? Ladies and gentlemen, dear panelists, who would like to take this question first?
Видади, не желаете ли?
Видади, maybe you can begin. If I begin, that actually will be a very long answer, but let's give it a try. Let's give it a whirl. Adlet, as you already said, there is a lot of innovation every day, basically in our life. And an innovative school, in my understanding, it's one that will teach children to think, to use all the information around them to reach their goals. That's an innovative school. But also students should be taught citizenship, that they have to be taught how to be responsible and active citizens. An innovative school is one that will teach children, that will form them into active citizens ready to interact with the world outside and be useful to the world outside. Thank you very much. Next. I guess I will continue. I guess I will fully agree with Видади. I agree with him 100%. But if we look at innovation as something trivial, and most people by innovation, they mean technology, they mean some new devices or features, then broadly, innovation that we offer in schools that call themselves innovative, the technologies that these schools offer, these innovations for us, for our children, that's something that they use on a daily basis. They know about those innovations, and actually they know more about these innovations than their teachers. And sometimes those technologies actually even appeared before these children were born. They grew up with those innovations. It's not an innovation for them. It's a given. For example, when I was born, TV was a given. But for my parents' generation, TV was a breakthrough technology. Color television was a breakthrough. But for me, it was a given. Likewise, for my children, for our children, what we offer in our schools, it's a given. It's something that they use day in, day out. And we use these technologies because we need to talk to them in their language. We need them to understand us.
Спасибо, Yernar.
Thank you very much, Yernar. Next, please. Good afternoon, everyone again. I would like to look at innovation in depth because very often in science and philosophy, attention is paid to etymology, to the origin of every definition of every word. And if you look at the etymology of this word innovation, what it means that you need to bring something new into the education process, into the learning process. And I believe that is the root of the problem, that education pretty much never lives up to the level of development of society where we are at. Society develops, but education lags behind. Or society changes, but education, because it's much more inert, it's much more conservative, and change in education takes time, takes money, takes determined, concerted effort. It takes time. It cannot happen overnight. So imagine a situation where society changes, and if education can keep pace with changes in society, then innovative education loses its meaning, because then education will be on par with society. So there is always a lack. Unfortunately, some countries change their education faster, some do it slower. So actually don't like that word, innovative school, innovative education. Schools just have to meet the expectations of society. That's it. There is no need to brand schools innovative. That's my point of view. What I'm trying to say, I'm not against innovation, don't misconstrue me. I just don't like this label as applied to education, as applied to schools. So that's an interesting and provocative point of view. Alia? So I think in society and in education, there is just not one straight line. On the one hand, you have traditional education. On the other hand, you have innovative education. Actually, it's all mixed. Opinions are also mixed. So there is no linear definition. So what I mean by innovative education is a school that tries to think outside the box, that tries to act outside the box and teach outside the box, such as Montessori, for example. That's innovation education. So any experimentation justifies the label innovative. I have a question for you. Your position is called innovation manager. And as such, through your professional responsibilities, through that prism, what do you do as innovation manager at your school? And what are the examples of innovations that you've applied in your school? In my case, when I was hired for that position, I had a long discussion with the principal where changes needed to be made, in which direction we believe the school needs to change, and we identified several directions. Project education, the project method of education, that's number one. Number two, greater cooperation among teachers, cross-disciplinary teaching, in other words. That's number two, and also training of teachers, continuous development of teachers, professional, personal, and creating opportunities for feedback from teachers to the leadership of the school. That's what we've done. That's what we call innovation. That's the work that I have cut out for me. Thank you very much, Aliyah. So we have discussed this, and we see that most of our speakers are in agreement about the definition of innovative education, but I very much liked what Amalidi said. He said he didn't like the word innovative as applied to schools and education. I would like to continue on with that take. My personal opinion is that innovative schools, new schools, although these terms for whatever reason are only assumed for private schools. Rarely, if at all, do we hear the same labels used for public schools. In your opinion, why do we have this dichotomy? And if, yes, of course, public schools need to change as well. Why this transformation should be pursued by public schools? Should they initiate this process themselves without waiting for the ministry, or should that be the responsibility of the Ministry of Education to do it top-down, to force public schools to pursue innovation, for them to deserve this label, innovative schools, or at least to use new teaching and learning methods. So let's continue on with that discussion. Yernar, maybe you can answer. Yes, I'll be very happy to do that. I worked in public schools, in public education a lot, in different positions. I provided services and I was employed by a public school. I think the most important thing, what is the separation between the so-called private schools, the so-called innovative schools? What separates them from public schools is that in private schools, we have much more academic freedom. We can use very quickly best international experience. We have a lot less red tape. We have a lot less bureaucratic standards that we have to meet. We have a lot less limits. For example, Aliyah talked about innovation, project education, cross-disciplinary teaching. It's for Kazakhstan, that's an innovation, but project education, project learning has existed for 50 or 60 years. But for public schools, it will be impossible to do that. In a private school, we can go for project learning tomorrow. We can experiment with project-based learning and roll it out quickly. For a public school, that will be very difficult to do that. It probably will take them a year at least, and that's optimistically speaking, for them to go for that change. Because they will need to secure a lot of permissions, collect a lot of signatures, etc., etc. And even buying some new equipment, an electronic board, for example, for a public school, it will take years for them to secure permission to procure something like that, because that's a big ticket item. In a private school, that can happen overnight. But actually, in private schools, we get our best teachers from public schools. They come to us from public schools. Because teachers who have shown themselves to be innovative in a public school setting, they will blossom in a private school setting. And again, I will agree with Aliyah. He said that there is no line. It's not linear. what is innovative, what is traditional. That is absolutely correct. There is no one-size-fits-all solution that will work for all the children across the board. You need to try different methodologies. You need to test out different approaches targeted for different groups of children. There is no one best curriculum. All curricula are good, including even those that are used in public schools. Application, that's a different matter. My son, for example, goes to a public school, and there are some public schools which deserve this label, innovative, and they use some breakthrough advanced methodologies that we don't even use in private schools. So if we support public schools and public school teachers in terms of continued development, if we give them freedom to choose continued development in what they would like to excel in, then that will definitely give a huge leg up to our public schools. Thank you very much, Yernar. Hangildi.
Очень интересная дискуссия.
That's a very interesting discussion. I was happy to hear a variety of opinions. My approach, again, will be a little more controversial. I'm not a teacher by education. I am a mathematician and an economist. So I believe that in education, there are two pillars. First of all, formation of citizens, because every country would like to see the new generation to be patriotic, to be good, upstanding citizens. So that's formation. But also there is a link to economic development. You really shouldn't bring up a new generation of patriots if your economy is lacking, if your economy is weak. So economic policy should also be in place. Also, it's impossible to have a good education system without a sound economic foundation, without a vibrant economy. So first, the government needs to pay attention to the economy, and to what extent universities in particular, not schools, but universities are tied to the economy, and to what extent universities teach and prepare the graduates for the labor market. And if that exists, then we can improve the level of the quality of education in universities, and that will trickle down to high schools, to middle schools, and to primary schools as well. So when we have that, when we have good quality of education in universities, that will mean that graduates will also go to teach in high schools, in middle schools, in the primary schools. First, we need to improve higher education. So we need to look at the higher education, tertiary education, and secondary education. This divide between tertiary and secondary and primary and preschool education is artificial. We have to look at it holistically. Just introducing innovation in secondary education will not yield results. Because if you do that, your high school graduates will go abroad to study in universities. If there are no good universities, you will lose your talented children from secondary education. So everything has to be done in tandem.
Спасибо, Хангильде. Вот, Ернар, я хотел еще раз к вам вернуться. И вот из того, что Хангильде сказал, вы согласны?
Do you agree that we need to start with higher education and that secondary education and higher education should go in tandem?
Как директор начальной школы, вы можете, может, у вас другое мнение.
Or as a secondary school principal, do you disagree? I actually do agree. It does make sense for us to develop specialists.
мы называем инновационными, потом успешно внедрять на практике. Но я бы хотел добавить, что
I can add here that I myself am a graduate of two teaching colleges, and what we lack in universities are the people who see in practice what's happening in schools. So it probably would be good in universities also to have as professors people who know firsthand the situation with secondary education. I, for example, like the experience of Finland, let's say, 50, 60 years ago, where they raised the level of secondary education and tertiary education significantly.
Не тех, кто не смог поступить на нефтяное дело, не на экономику или на другие специальности. Начали набирать только самые высокие баллы.
Person could get admitted to oil affairs and other specialties and only to our university. And when the pedagogical universities, teachers training universities did not work, and we need to improve our education so that the children would be interested to enter the teachers training universities, and for that we need to improve the reputation of the education, teachers training education. I wouldn't say that we should start it with primary school or secondary school. I think it needs to be done simultaneously at the same time, so that there is a good link between the universities and schools, so that the people who teach the future teachers should know what is happening in school and which way to move ahead. So this kind of symbiosis is necessary in my view.
Я бы хотел высказаться.
I would like to express my view, if you allow, since we started talking about the higher education. This is exactly what I'm doing. I'm a facilitator. I'm helping to choose the future profession for the students. And I fully agree with Anit and Yernar that the higher education is somewhat at a different level compared to all other countries, and I fully agree with the idea that the higher education for the teachers is not on the right level. And I liked what you said, Yernar, about the experience of Finland and Singapore, where the teacher is not a conventionally respected person, but indeed a respected person, and indeed only the best teachers are educated there because they are entrusted with education of students. And I also liked the idea of Hangildi about the brain drain, about the students who go abroad, and very many of the students don't like to stay here. And if the children are saying that they would like to live abroad, and 1 of 10 would say that he would like to come back to the country and improve the economy of the country, I think it has to be very alarming for both for the government as a whole and for the education sector in particular. And we need to do something with that. And I agree that we need to see what the country needs from the economic viewpoint, as Hangilde said, but I disagree that for that you definitely need higher education background, because in the current world there are lots of online courses, lots of internships, and you can be successful and interesting and useful for the society, for the community, and for the country, and for yourself without any higher education. What is enough is to find your own path, to find something that is your passion and that you would be interested in, and you would be successful if you develop in that area. I have the experience that there are lots of students who did not graduate from the universities. They graduated from normal school, 12 grades, and they realized that IT sector is everything for them. And one of such students, he came to that area through a different path. He dreamed to become professional gamer, but eventually he ended up coming to the coder, and after he graduated grades 11 and 12, he came to Chocobron and is quite successful there. So I mean that even without higher education, if you find something that would be kind of entertainment for that, and you are good at that, it could become your profession, and for that you don't need to get the higher education. Thank you.
Спасибо, Видади. И меня
Thanks, Vidadi. I was recently cut off from Zoom, and I missed some of the discussion. So, Aliya, could you share some of the views with us? Yes, definitely. Asking your first question, my response would be very prosaic. Why innovative word is not correlated with the private schools, because the marketing for them is just to attract clients. But in fact, the progressive and promising forms are available in the public schools as well. It's some kind of the called refresher courses in my particular subject, being a teacher. During the 5 years of experience of these new courses, this is a well-established educational goals, and they go in line with the time requirements, even though it's 5 years old. However, indeed, changes are more complex to introduce in the public education because the inertia is higher of the entire system, because the scope is higher and scale is higher, and it will be difficult to move a great number of schools ahead. And in small schools or private schools, it's much easier to do trials and to do experimenting based on certain guidelines or recommendations. And I would like also to comment the discussion that took place regarding the reforms in school education, that they should stem from improvement of qualifications and skills of the graduates from the teachers training universities. And I agree with that. But on the other hand, I consider that it's not so much this which is the problem, but rather my personal view that the whole educational system is somewhat closed from the entire society, from the rest of the community. I'm not so much worried about the fact that the teachers are not very well trained or prepared, but rather the fact that their subject is not so much linked to the practice, to the future lives. So it would be probably good to somehow break the walls of education system that separates it from the everyday practice, and then it would be much easier to introduce changes, because it will be better understood what the labor market needs, what kind of people should graduate schools, what should be the sets of skills that they master, and then introduce them into schools. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Aliya. I would also like to support Aliya, because I always had this feeling that the teachers and schools in general lack some independence, and we are not talking about the full freedom of action, but some kind of freedom should be available for them. And before the next question, I would like to note that even before pandemic in 2019, one of the schools in the capital city, they initiated a project for distant learning. I think the project was called Free from School. They get the permission, and then this permission was withdrawn, and everything got changed. And first they allowed to do the distant teaching, and then they prohibited that. So though it was 1 year before the pandemic, so the school missed the chance to be prepared and to test a new format of distant learning, which eventually later could play a positive role, because in 2020 we got into the pandemic and everyone got online anyway, but very quickly with certain issues. But at the same time, this pushed the development of various edtech projects aimed at primarily the students, since there are lots of various platforms, apps, and so on. And some of the projects, including our project that is aimed at teachers, educators. Could you share your experience and your opinions about edtech projects, some innovative products in education that already play a role in your schools, somehow used, whether they have a positive or negative impact? We have been living in the online regime for 1 year, and now we can see already what can happen, because we have lived in it for 1 year already. I suggest that we discuss this topic first, and then I would ask each speaker to think during the next less than 20 minutes about some things that he would personally like to specifically talk about. I have a lot of questions. I would normally have no chance to ask all of them, but probably you have more clarity about what specifically you would like to discuss. So let's first start with Hangilde. Unfortunately, I'm less educated in this regards compared to my colleagues, because I'm not in favor of various technologies in education. I still believe that the blackboard and the chalk and the roommate classroom-based system is much better. However, I would like to mention a couple of things here, that we were pretty successful working online during this year, and we could even see that technologies, though it's a tool for the teacher, very much depends on the teacher anyway. The teacher could keep the attention of the students or may not. It could make them disciplined, or the children may not listen to the teacher and misbehave. And everything that happens in the classrooms happens online anyway. Whether they listen to the teacher or not, it's again the human factor that works here more than 50%. So the instruments or technologies will not help. And I know that there is a saying that any century eventually would be considered as the black century. 100 years later, somebody would say, you remember how people lived 100 years ago? This is unrealistic. Probably the technologies did not reach that level, so that they can pretty successfully replace the educators or teachers. Probably we are only at the beginning of the path, so we need to give a chance to the technologies. And probably, yes, the role of the human being, of the teacher, is the key role, but probably it will gradually diminish in the course of technology development. However, I believe that the attention of the student or the pupil is still important, and until we do some biohacking, we will not be able to keep the attention of the pupils. How the teachers do it, I don't understand, because when the pupil is sitting in the classroom and he is a part of the process, this is absolutely different, and the brain responds in a different way to the signals, to the irritating factors, so that you can get the person interested. When he only sees the screen with the face of the teacher, he or she cannot be a part of interaction. He can only see the teacher. So here very much depends on how, to what extent in the real life they have a connect. So if they don't have any connection, any connect in the real life, this online education will not change it. So the online education doesn't make sense alone, but only together with the offline education. Probably a disclaimer could be that probably now it's considered to be somewhat fantastic, but probably in 100 years or in 50 years we will be surprised. We will be somewhat thinking that it was fun to have such kind of classes, and probably some kind of motivation could be invented. Okay, thank you, Vidadi. In your operation, in your work as the career guiding person, have you already started using some tools or at school? Yes. I would like to start with a general viewpoint. I also teach, and we in our school have this edtech project, and we use team teaching. The teachers are from various sectors, and the last project I was involved in was for the 10th grade, and we were talking about eco school. We discussed what needs to be done for the school to become eco school, so that they would get this shield of the eco school. This was all done online, and it was very hard to do so, as Hangildi said, that these are just tools, and you should be able to master them. Our school normally use Google products, Google Meet and Google Classroom. Google Classroom is a very useful tool because you can upload the tasks or the problems there, and they could then solve them. We split the kids into several groups, and for them to be motivated, we created some kind of a diary or a log where the students would, at the end of the day, write some notes. We gave tasks both in Google Class and in the diaries. We could read them, and we could provide the feedback. In fact, it doesn't differ very much from offline. It's just that we didn't see their faces. We could see the faces when they turn on their cameras, but not as well as when they do it offline. As for the career guide, you know that there are lots of resources. I can contact the kids in WhatsApp or through Google Classroom. I would download various materials, articles to them, and I maintained my blog, and pushed them all to subscribe to it, because in Google Classroom they couldn't contact me. So, and there are also various platforms for career guidance, and you can also get students, provide interesting articles and tests. They all like testing, both psychological ones. Someone are interested from Harry Potter tests, and based on those tests, you can find a lot about yourself. So it doesn't mean that the test would say that starting from this day you are an engineer and you should be doing that, or you are a painter or an artist and this is your future profession. No, they help identifying something in yourselves which you don't see. And there are lots of such online resources, and you need to find them and to provide access to them. Aliyah? What is your experience? My experience is less optimistic about online education. You know, there were lots of Western articles with such a big pitfall about the knowledge of people, of children, and this is going to be the generation that would get significantly less knowledge. And I consider myself being a part of millions of people who bear the responsibility for this loss, because
ну, как бы наши тоже объективно, если...
A lot of schools, including ours, if you look at objectively, did not cope well with the combined education. Fortunately, pandemic came to the time when all people online, you can do it quite successfully because there are other platforms, Nearport and Cohort, which could be used, and we use them. But when it's a combined education, when part of children stay at home and some children can come to the to schools, this requires not so many technologies from the point of view of computer technologies or software, but the methodologies or technologies of how to put together the logistics at school that you don't require from kids to stay the same amount of time at school as they do at home as they do at school, especially if it's a child of the
Забыла, как началось это предложение. Ну, в общем, нужны вот такие вот технологии.
Middle school and high school. So we do need the technologies, how to build the school operation logistically from the point of view of teachers, equipment, and students and school children, so that in the same class, the children who study online and offline could have the same experience of learning. Okay, Yernar?
Так, я хочу немного порассуждать.
I would like to reflect a little bit on, if we look at the global human history, the class-based, lesson-based history is an innovation. It emerged 100 years ago. Previously, for centuries, people could not even imagine that people could be trained or educated in the same place.
So there was just one teacher and one student. That was the MO. With time, we learned to have a different MO, one teacher, up to 100 students, this cohort system of education, which we have right now. And we're used to it. I'm pretty sure that 100 years ago, there were people who were against this classroom teaching, that many people probably believed that this would have killed education. But likewise here, many people are now against online education, but online is the future. And if this pandemic continues, it doesn't have to be COVID-19, it can be different virus or different bacterium. And if we move fully online, and then if somebody suggests after that, let's move back offline, then people will be against offline. People are always against any change from what they're used to. I think human thinking is inert, it's conservative, and if we're used to something, we don't want to go anywhere from it, back or forth, back or forward. And let's take a look at this pandemic. Now people understand that going digital, going online is the way to go. Many people were not used to it, but now the very same people are all online, and they are all for online. And there are many technologies that also help that teachers use as teaching aids. Teachers now use these online technologies, and we can improve our educational system by using that. And we can improve our general situation. Doesn't have to be in education, but in any function of our life. And that's a huge area of potential research because the pandemic impacted pretty much everyone. Everyone moved online, not just education, but also work moved online. And education educational researchers believe that the future of education is not just one-on-one teaching, where you have one student to one teacher on Zoom, but it's not a cohort approach where 100 students or thousands of students get the same information, irrespective of their learning ability. That's the future is in a mixed approach, which absorbs elements of cohort education and one-on-one education as well. And that method, mixed method, can be conducted offline. That will benefit from the centuries of our experience, and online. Even for our first graders, just think about it. Many of our first graders who started school last September, they haven't been in the classroom. They haven't been in the classroom. And if we continue with online education, and the second grade will be online too, it would be a huge shock for them to go back offline, because they're used to computer-based education. They're used to online education. Going offline for them would be shock. It's for us, it's difficult to fathom, to imagine an offline educational setting. But for many of our first graders, that's what they're used to. That's the only reality that they know.
Спасибо, Ернар.
Видади хочет что-то добавить.
Кто?
Я хочу добавить.
Yes, I would like to add something. Yes, actually, we don't have a lot of time. We only have 5 minutes left in our session. So with your permission, I just would like to give every speaker an opportunity to wrap up. But just to wrap up with the most salient points that you believe are pertinent to this session about the school of the future. For the future, the school of today, what should we pay attention to? I believe that we need to work on
педагогов, сообществ студентов,
coherence, so coherent among teachers, coherent among parents, coherence in society. We work with our teachers, and teachers need to have the confidence that their efforts are enough to improve their lives, to make their professional career and activities better, and to help one another develop. That's my opinion. So we have 4 minutes time, just 1 minute for every speaker, no more. Vidadi, you go first. I would like to add what Yernar said, just about the role of the teacher in society. If during the cohort method of education, the teacher was the only source of information, right now we have a multitude of sources of information, and the role of the teacher is to help every student to absorb as much information as they can. So the teacher is no longer the sole source of information. The teacher is the moderator, the gatekeeper to that information. And our role as teachers is to help our students find the right information, find the reliable sources of information, because there are many sources and not all of them are reliable. And I also agree with communities. So we need to have teaching communities, learning communities. Experience is meant to be shared. And Gildi, just a couple of words, a couple of the most important words. Yes, I fully agree with the moderator of this session, with Adlet, that indeed integration of teachers, of parents, of all the stakeholders in education, that is very important to have communities around learning, around education, and we need to spend every effort to propagate this notion that schools are not separated from society. School and society, school and life are one and the same. School is a continuation of life, and life is a continuation of school. Aliyah? Yes, I also agree with you, Adlet, and just my favorite term that I like, black box. There are a lot of discussions around education, but only precious little of those discussions trickle down to education. And I think the best innovation that we can come up with is just rolling out innovation, not just talking about innovation, but actually changes education inside this black box. Thank you very much. And Yernar?
Еще одна, допустим, такая мечта, скажем так, что
and another dream, it might be a pipe dream. We have to move away from textbooks. Just like teachers are not the only source of information, textbooks also should not determine educational content. It would be great for teachers if teachers could develop their own content, develop their own lesson plans, instead of relying exclusively on textbooks. And if teachers can do that, then the students also would do that. And in that case, they would not be reliant on just one source of information. Excellent. I will fully agree with you here. I will support your opinion because of what we do. We actually give our teachers opportunity to generate their own content. So thank you very much, everyone, for the discussion. So the discussion has come to an end, and I hope there will be plenty of opportunities to have similar discussions in the future as well. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you all again.